We spend 1,000 times more on global fossil fuel subsidies than on natural-based solutions.
Natural climate solutions get just 2% of all the money used on tackling climate breakdown.
This is your money. It is your taxes and your savings.
Even more crazy, right now where we need nature the most, we're destroying it faster than ever.
Up to 200 species are going extinct every single day.
Much of the Arctic ice is gone. Most of our wild animals have gone. Much of our soil has gone.
So what should we do?
What should you do?
It's simple. We need to protect, restore and fund. Protect. Tropical forests are being cut down at the rate of 30 football pitches a minute.
Where nature is doing something vital, we must protect it.
Restore. Much of our planet has been damaged.
But nature can regenerate, and we can help ecosystems bounce back.
Fund.
We need to stop funding things that destroy nature and pay for things that help it.
It is that simple. Protect, restore, fund.
This can happen everywhere. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this.
Vote for people who defend nature.
Share this video. Talk about this.
All around the world, there are amazing movements fighting for nature. Join them.
Everything counts. What you do counts.
Thank you very much. There's a hope urge for the youngsters in Malaysia and ASEAN to be an active agent to disseminate information to the public and join in this spring campaign. And what she said also, we need to protect, restore and fund. Now moving on to the next session, our first talk session will emphasize on the youth empowerment for green initiative, mobilizing young change makers in Malaysia, and also will touch about the quality of education, affordable and clean energy, climate action, partnership for the goals. And without further ado, I would like to invite our moderator Nazira Hazar for this slot, and Nazira also will introduce the guests and panelists on stage.
Hello everyone, my name is Nazira. I am one of the secretariats from Youth Sustainability Forum 2023. So let's have a seat first. Okay, for today's session, this is the first the first panel speakers. The first forum session that we'll be having today. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous. This session is called the Empowering Youth in Green Initiatives. So how are we gonna mobilize our youth in combating climate change? Sorry. Okay. So before we begin our session, I'm gonna introduce a little bit of our panel speakers. A super short introduction, I guess. Okay. So first we have Sarah Isha. She's from UNICEF. Okay, so Sarah is a dynamic professional dedicated to combating climate change. As we all know, I think UNICEF Youth Climate Champion is not something that is new to us. It's everywhere. You can see a lot of familiar faces around here as well from UNICEF Youth Climate Champion. And so her diverse background, for example, like her involvement in urban biodiversity and also free, has reflects her commitment to driving positive change in the fight against climate change while effectively communicating the urgency of sustainable practices. So she'll be here to give a little bit insights on how are we empowering youth to take an action. So moving on to the next speaker, Shakib. So Shakib is an accomplished climate finance policy consultant. He has a background in finance and economics, and he specialized in climate finance and climate budgeting. So his expertise extends to his role as a climate finance policy consultant, which he plays an important role in mitigating the financial impacts of climate-related disasters in Malaysia. So now onto the next one, our third speaker, Faiz. He's the Managing Director at LabTech Energy Sdn Bhd. So Faiz is a dedicated leader who blends his passion for sustainability with the corporate world. So he's currently serving as the non-independent, non-executive director of LabTech Energy Berhad since 2021, and back then he started out as the audit associate at Deloitte Malaysia. So now the Managing Director of LabTech Energy, Faiz advances sustainability through advisory services, green technology, and renewables. Alright, so yeah, okay, in this session, right, we'll be exploring critical role of youth empowerment in promoting green initiatives and mobilizing young change makers in Malaysia. So we will also be touching a little bit on how we're doing with the climate vulnerable communities, as well as some young talents in renewable sectors, because climate advocacy is not only all the grassroots initiatives, it also involves taking part of the what can we do on the corporate side as well, businesses as well, right? Okay, so now let's get to the very first question. So Sarah, I think I'm a strong believer that youth are full of passion, so they will make ways in they will do in any ways in making change to make the world a better place. So in our case, we want to make sure that Earth is still livable for our grandkids in 100 years to come. So as a climate advocate, Sarah, what kind of challenges have you encountered in mobilizing challenges that you have encountered in the sustainability sector, and how do you suggest these challenges can be effectively addressed?
Thank you, Nazira, for the question, and don't worry, I'm nervous too. Okay, so I think first and foremost, I kind of want to establish that I'm not an advocate. I'm actually an enthusiast. Specifically, I'm a nature enthusiast because I love nature. Partly it's probably because of my degree in ecology and my upbringing in the forest, but it's also because of Malaysia's incredible biodiversity. After all, Malaysia is one of the world's most biodiverse countries. So ladies and gentlemen, let's go through some of the textbook Malaysian species that we know by heart. So you've got our pride and joy, Harimau Malaya. Can we get a little woot woot for Harimau Malaya? So we've also got our huge Rafflesia flower, tapirs, orangutan, and so much more. So on top of these biodiversity, we've also got our fungi, our insects, and our invertebrates. So we're so biodiverse. But the thing is, we don't hear enough about biodiversity when we're talking about climate change. So it's either, yes, we're not talking enough about biodiversity when we're talking about climate change, or we're losing our biodiversity. I mean, as most of you know, we have less than 150 Harimau Malaya roaming in our forest, and that's the distressing numbers. And that's only us talking about one species. And there's a whole list of biodiversity that are endangered, or worse, critically endangered, or about to be extinct, right? So it's not like we don't have efforts. We do have the Central Forest Spine Project, the 100 million plant a tree campaign, and also corporates are always eager to do tree planting. But the thing is, there's the challenge of addressing the lack of understanding between biodiversity and climate change. So, because there's a lot of doing without the knowing, right? So, in my opinion, as a youth, it stems a lot from, obviously, education. So the course of action would ultimately be education, right? So it's not just from schools and higher education institutions, it's also for corporates as well. So prior to the actual tree planting campaign, have like a session, an educational session for the corporates or those involved in the tree planting campaign. It could also be youth groups, right? And let them know how important their action is for the future. In a way, it helps with their sense of self-worth, that they're not just doing it for their SDGs or ESGs for the company. They're actually doing it for their future, for their children's future, right? Yeah. Apart from that, because I'm a big content creator, so it's also about the representation of our biodiversity. So can I just have a raise of hands? Who has a social media account? It can be Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. Okay, roughly everybody, right? So that means everybody here is a content creator. And that means everybody here has the power to give our biodiversity the recognition it deserves.
All right, that's very well said. So I would like to highlight that one point you mentioned, that not only us on what we can do, right, as on ourselves, by ourselves, it also the role of the corporates on what they can contribute towards climate, to help us combat climate change. So Faiz, speaking of what corporates can do, right, I believe you could relate this because LabTech revolves around this area. So if you are not aware, LabTech, they incorporate green technology like smart and AI into their renewables, into their solutions, for example, like on the renewable energy as well. So yeah, do you mind highlighting like some of the challenges that you see in integrating smart or AI technology in revolutionizing the green sector? Yeah.
Okay, thank you Nazira for the question. Hi everyone. Very good question. For me, I think the main challenge when it comes to implementing new technologies or renewable energy into buildings, especially existing buildings, right, is actually the change management and the understanding of why these technologies need to be implemented, and how that increases efficiency and how that contributes back to preserving climate. Unfortunately, what I see, it is a challenge, and of course every challenge is an opportunity, is to how do we change that mindset at all levels, because I think most of the time people look at you know, energy costs or energy bills within a building as a very minimal cost compared to the other operating expense, and all their goal is to just you know, be for profit. But what they fail to see is, you know, when you run your building, you run your buildings inefficiently, this leads to high, not only wastage in energy, but also carbon emissions, but it also affects the productivity of the people within that area, right? So there's a lot of education that needs to be done. Smart building is not just a technology, right? It's a tool, but the most important thing is to understand why we're doing it. And that's what we strive to do in LabTech Energy, to help, because you can put any technology you want there, the most advanced technology, but if people don't understand why and how to use it properly, there's no point. So that's the biggest challenge that I face so far.
Yeah, okay. So do you mind commenting a little bit, like how is it going with young talents joining your companies? Do you have any challenge, like maybe not all of them understand exactly how these technologies being incorporated in the renewable energy sector? Yeah.
Yes, just a bit of background about LabTech Energy. As I mentioned, our company is actually a sustainability services company where we provide two sort of core services. One is LabEd. This is our education arm, which focuses on helping or setting the foundational knowledge on sustainability and helping empower people in organizations to embark on that sustainability journey. And secondly is LabTech. This is our technological arm where we come up with innovative solutions from AI, IoT, even EVs, to help accelerate that journey of sustainability, because I believe that technology should be used hand in hand with the sustainability goal. And for both of these divisions are actually led by youth younger than me. right?
That's very, very great.
Yes, it's because that I believe that we as youth, we have the you know, the dynamism, the power, the urgency to do things. And I think I'm very lucky to have them in my team because, you know, they are very hungry to learn new things, and they're very hungry. It's okay, for me, simple. It doesn't matter that, you know, you don't know everything. Things can be learned, right? The most important thing is, you know, having that growth mindset and always adapting to new situations and whatever challenges that you face, right? But that being said, you know, coupled with experience from quote unquote the older generation, I don't like to use that term, but or the experienced generation, I think with these two sort of combination, any organization can you know, propel to become a highly effective organization.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the insight. So now I think we can move on to the next bit of my question deck. So we want to talk about a little bit on climate vulnerable communities, right? So maybe we can start with Shakib. So because you have an experience in Malaysia disaster event, and also you also have a background in climate finance. So I want to know to what extent our local communities and grassroots organizations are involved in climate finance decisions and disaster risk reduction initiatives, and how can they their perspective be integrated effectively?
Hello, good morning everyone. Thank you, Nazira, on the questions. I think that's a very good questions. To be honest, when it comes to climate finance, actually the discussion is super niche, but in the climate space, it's not that niche. There's a biodiversity finance, there's a conservation finance, and right now I'm in the conservation finance after this towards a biodiversity finance. However, when it comes to climate finance, it is a very important topic to discuss, where it is an overarching principle of how you can see the finance flows towards the climate activities or climate projects. It is something that we need to look into more, and I think it is, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2010 there's a discussion, but it's quite minor. But the discussion in youth level is not there yet. But back in 2018, the discussion is getting much more larger and larger, and right now people, you know, young people start to talk about climate finance even more, and you know, talking about EFT, basic principles, basic instruments on the carbon pricing and such. So I think that's a very good thing. And then when it comes to the disaster part, most of the people always cover on the post disaster, which is the relief as such. But here's the thing, most of people don't understand, or maybe the avenue of getting to understand on the pre-disaster, it is not there. The discussion is not there yet. I believe that there's a small discussion among themselves, but the discussion is not in a large picture. There's no big picture on it. During my taking a break from career, it is a fun research for me. I'm not sure about other people talking about mathematics and economics. I'm not sure if that is fun for you guys, but I think it's fun for me. What I learned about back in 2021, 2022, I think most of you guys saw my Twitter account always update amount of loss throughout the Malaysia disaster. I think from there, we would like to know more how much the implication costs. And if let's say this implication cost it's high up, how much the inflation will become. So that's the part where I try to go beyond on the flight inflation theory. If let's say it's going high up, what we can do about it. So I think that's the question, a good question on the pre-discussion on the disaster. So coming back to climate finance, I think the problems or the gaps when it comes to this thing is the communications. I believe that most of the language of the climate, I believe three of us can accept this as well. The language is around the Cloudberry area. it's not very layman-centric. And I think this is one of the things that we try in Twitter on how to make it layman. To be honest, when it comes to layout to the communities and engage to the communities, we need to find a right tune to talk to them about all these things. Example, when it comes to climate, the only 3 keywords that can touch to them is banjir, second one is tanah runtuh, ketiga Maidin habis. So we took the concept of the Shah Alam concept. So from that point, people have that big picture, or at least they have a visualization that, okay, look, climate, when it comes to climate vulnerabilities, is equal to loss of economy. So when it comes to loss of economy, I cannot get a food, I cannot get other stuff, and most of people affected, and then it goes on and on and on. So it's a vicious cycle. So it's something that I think communication is a key. And in Malaysia, when it comes to climate communication, I think there is a super niche that we haven't touched yet. I think previously we have some people that cover on that thing, but didn't go much more beyond that. I think we need to have much more discussion on the climate communication itself. Yeah, that's from.
That's very, very insightful. I totally agree with that. So coming back to you, Sarah, right? So we just talk about when we say about climate vulnerable communities, we only have those kind of thoughts. So I was wondering, how do you think of our policymakers' work in tackling this issue to ensure that nobody is left behind? Like this climate change doesn't only affect the day-to-day income group, or for those who live in the flood-prone area, or the less rainfall distribution area. So what do you think of how are we doing in our policies?
Well, I can only comment from the perspective of a city girl, but in my opinion, everybody is a climate change victim. But based on the impact of climate change on children report by UNICEF and UNDP, children are actually the most affected when it comes to climate change. So, for example, let's take flooding as an example in the city, right? So, when we experience climate change, and we will experience heavier rainfall, and with that, more flood occurrences. And floods, they're annoying, they're an eyesore, they're painful, they're distressing, right? So we think about, okay, what happens to us? So okay, public transportation is disrupted, access to clean water is gone. But when it comes to children, the effects are disproportionate because they experience all that. And plus, the probability of having PTSD, post-trauma stress disorder, from being exposed at such a traumatic event at such a young age, and the susceptibility of waterborne diseases such as typhoid fever and cholera. So children are facing the heavier blow when it comes to climate change, yet they're not really included in the design of climate policies. So with that said, there needs to be a more inclusive decision-making processes that includes children and youths, because we are the future, right? We're all potentially the dinosaurs of the future, but yeah. So, in my opinion, at the moment, actually, us UNICEF Youth Climate Champions, we're in the midst of formalizing a CUI-CCC, which is Children and Youth Council on Climate Change, which hopes to successfully penetrate the policy making and decision processes in Malaysia.
Okay. So now we've come to the last bit of the discussion. So what is the way forward to especially in youth capacity, in building youth capacity in climate action, right? So back to Faiz. So I understand that renewable energy is super important right now, especially when we are trying to phase out fossil fuel towards a greener energy. So a couple of weeks ago, we, like what Tan Sri Wahid mentioned this morning, we have recently launched the first part of Malaysia's national energy transition. So in this growing industry, right, Faiz, so what skills or talents you believe young people can bring to the table when it comes to technology, when it comes to renewable energy?
Thank you for the question. And I think when you talk about environment, it's just more than just renewable energy. There's a lot of things that we can do, right? I'm not so fond on focusing on when we talk about how do we preserve environment, or we just talk about renewables, because I feel like people tend to jump on the bandwagon, right? There are a lot of other things that we can do in terms of changing our lifestyle, in terms of having much more efficient sort of processes. So for the youth, my advice on how to prepare yourself for this is, if you are really interested into coming into the sustainability sector, is to really, first of all, understand the basic principles of sustainability. And when you have that strong fundamentals and foundations, that's where you can effectively innovate solutions from there. Secondly, my advice is, as I mentioned just now, to always have a growth mindset and take initiative. Right? Don't wait for the opportunity to come to you. Just create the opportunity, right? And always look at challenges as opportunities to grow, especially in this ever-changing and ever-evolving sector of sustainability and climate change, right? And lastly is to never compromise on collaboration and having collaborative leadership, right? For us at LabTech Energy, collaboration is non-negotiable because the challenge of sustainability is so huge. You yourself cannot do it alone, right? And you have to work together and take the opportunity, to network in, forums like YCF today, to learn from each other, whether it's young, whether it's old, and to apply to your daily lives and see how we can collectively work towards the same goal and the same vision, right? So that's my key takeaway lah.
Okay. Thank you for your thoughts on that. And I think we've come to the last question. So Sarah, what do you think of resources out there that all of the youth can explore in order to learn more about climate change or take an action to do something for the environment?
Thank you for that question. That's the best question to ask me, actually, because I've got a lot to share when it comes to resources for the youths. So actually, I just want to share, in 2020, the Climate Change for Climate report by UNICEF Malaysia found that roughly 30% Malaysian youths didn't know where to start when it comes to taking climate action, although they had a good understanding of what climate change is about. Personally, I resonated with that. Despite working in the environmental sector as a junior ecologist, as a research officer for FRIM, so I felt lost and kind of alone, but that was before I jumped on the web bandwagon with my friends and started doing environmental work. So it's a really empowering step if you feel like you don't know where to start, so here are the breakdowns. So for starters, I urge youths to check out Youth Environment Living Labs, or fondly known as YEL. It is like a partnership of youths, young people, and organizations that really emphasizes on local narratives and stories that aims to address the resource gaps that we have within our local communities. We recently just launched our social media, so do give us a follow on Mari Kita Yel on Instagram. We've got really good informative content that's actually fun as well. And there's another UNICEF Youth Climate Champion in the crowd, Ideal. He's also in charge of doing a lot of the content on Yel as well. So another tip that I would like to share is actually dig deep and figure out what you love. Because this will be very helpful when you figure out which youth initiatives, organizations, or companies that you want to work for, right? So in order to do that, it's kind of your own self-awareness journey that you need to go on and figure out what you really love. Let's say you're into policies, then there's the Malaysian Youth Delegation. Let's say that you live, laugh, love the zero waste lifestyle. Then there's Zero Waste Malaysia. Maybe you love doing events. Then we've got Rimba Ilmu under the Habitat Foundation and also Taman Tugu. So there's a lot of organizations out there, but it helps when you narrow down what your passion is. And leading up to COP28, just want to drop this here. So we're going to have key events leading up to COP28. So if that interests you, then let's have a chat later and we'll see what we can slot you in with.
All right, that's very great. You know, one thing that I like about this club, right? We also have some of the high school students joining us, so it's very great by having all of panelists here to give like an eye-opening thoughts or new insights for them to like explore on later on, right? So these insights we have here today serve as a roadmap for us to channel our passion into meaningful action, right? So when we step out of the room, carry forward all these ideas, all these connections, and do something about it, right? And yeah, I think we have come to the end of the session. Super sorry for the, it should be like a more interactive session, more like a longer discussion. It's just that we are running out of time, so we have to cut short the questions from the floor. So yeah, I think I'll pass it back to Hafizi then. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our moderator Nazira Hazar and also the panelists that we have Sarah Asia, UNICEF Youth Climate Champion, and also Shakib Shahril Nizam, Climate Finance Consultant, Malaysia Disaster Event, and also Faiz Adri, Managing Director, Laptec Energy Sdn Bhd, to talk about the youth empowerment for green initiative. And for the next session, we have a new topic, which is young policymakers and food security, and we'll touch a few points of sustainable development goals, include no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, responsible consumption and production, climate action, and partnership for the goals. Without further ado, I would like to call upon IUM on stage.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone in the hall. My name is Rabiah Aminuddin. I'm with the Department of Political Science, International Islamic University, Malaysia, and I'll be moderating the session this afternoon. All right, so with me, today we are going to be discussing about a very important topic, which is on young policymakers and food security. So today I am joined by two, I would say, relatively young, distinguished gentlemen with me. We have YB Howard Lee, the MP for Ipoh Timur, and also YB Wan Ahmad Faisal, the MP for Machang. They both won the constituencies in 2022 during election. And I would say that they both have extensive experience in politics and as policymakers. YB Howard Lee won the seat on the ticket of Pakatan Harapan, and YB Wan Ahmad Faisal won the ticket on of PAS and Perikatan Nasional, right, in Kelantan. So, as we are talking about a very important topic, I have about only 30 minutes because I think our YBs are very busy and have other commitments as well. Food security is something that is very, very crucial, and it affects all levels of life. And if you look at the Maslow's hierarchy, that is the first basic needs that need to be fulfilled by human beings, right? And as of 2022, Malaysia is actually at is ranked 41st in terms of global food security index, which is, I would say, it's not too good, not too bad as well. So Perhaps I will start with YB Howard. In 2050, 40% of the global population is actually expected to experience food insecurity. And when we talk about food insecurity, we are not just talking about the availability of the food, we are talking about also the access to good food, nutritious food, and also how those food can actually be good for the people. Now, YB, what do you think about food insecurity and how important it is to address food security issue, especially for the young generation, and how it would affect them differently than the older generation?
Thank you. Big round of applause for our moderator and yourselves. Now, I'm going to feel a bit like an imposter. Yes, I'm an MP. In fact, dah dua dah, bukan ketiga dah. First term MP, third term Wakil Rakyat. But I'm actually here, I think, better off as a chef that I am. I'm chef by trade. Never been to university. Memang dari basuh pinggan sampai ke jadi chef lah. And I used to run pretty much every single job I've ever held in my life had something to do with food. I used to run an import-export company, trading house in food commodities, as well as I own a restaurant now. I think when we're talking about food security or insecurity, it should always be tied with the demand side. Do we all want good food? We're Malaysians, right? Now, I'm going to answer this question with a question. Everyone know what ikan bilis, right? Do you choose what ikan bilis you buy? Yes. Do you? Yes. Do you buy anyone from Bangkok sini? Orang Perak ada? Orang Perak sana begitu pekan, orang Perak kat belakang sana. Tahu tak Bangkok kat mana? West Bangkok. Did you know that suatu ketika dahulu zaman kegemilangan pengeluaran ikan bilis Malaysia, Bangkok used to be responsible for up to 70% of all ikan bilis that's consumed in Malaysia. Orang Kedah ada tak? Tanjung Dawai? Tanjung Dawai used to be a close second lah, but not that close lah. Now, did you know that if you go to Bangkok sekarang, at least half of what is sold as ikan bilis mata biru yang kepala dia besar, badan dia panjang. The head part is very important because I've actually done research. I'm so sad that I actually do research on output of basically. Anyone know what MSG is? Ajinomoto. You know what actually Ajinomoto is? It's glutamate, and that's what makes things taste good, right? So. Good food in ikan bilis means mata biru ikan bilis daripada Bangkok. Why? Because it has a higher head content and it makes it taste better. Now, at least half of what you'll find in Bangkok today, it's not actually from Bangkok. It's actually from Vietnam. Right? Which means that the insecurity part comes from where? It comes from suatu ketika dahulu until now. Local ikan bilis suppliers, producers, dryers, tak larat lah, because there was one point, there was such a huge swathe of ikan bilis from Vietnam who came in, swamped the market, and forced the producers out to the point that aku beli dari Vietnam lagi murah daripada nak kita buat sendiri. Apa nak buat? Beli jual je lah. Right? So I think when you link that to insecurity, the insecurity isn't just about availability. The insecurity is when the entire value chain, from procurement through to your business sustainability of producing something that has less food miles. Anyone familiar with the term food miles? Food emissions? Don't ask me why. Vietnamese punya ikan bilis, when they come, they don't come by sea. It gets traded through road, basically transported through road, has to be traded, people pusing kat KL sat, baru dia pergi Bangkok. So, ikan bilis producers in Bangkok have to sell ikan bilis. Ada yang sorok-sorok kata, actually this is from Vietnam, but I sell it with the name Bangkok. Whilst doing that, is contributing to emissions because the transport of Vietnamese ikan bilis going to Bangkok creates huge emissions impact. Now, the insecurity of that to the environment, the insecurity of those who used to create good income for themselves, decent jobs, you know, passing down the technology of drying ikan bilis has all gone down. So the insecurity isn't just about on the food, but the jobs and the economic opportunities that come as a part of it. How do we address it? Straight to the point. Bila kau membeli ikan bilis, tanyalah, is it from Vietnam or is it from Bangkok? Ask twice. Betul ke when they say from Bangkok? And when you see muka dia pucat sikit, insist on buying Bangkok or insist on buying Tanjung Dawai, insist on buying Malaysia. So insecurity is as much about the availability as much as it is about your choices as consumers. So I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, YB Howard. I think you raised a very important point about buying local products first, and and reduce our dependency on import food sources. YB Wanaman Faisal, I think where you were the Deputy Minister, I think twice, former Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports, and also former Deputy Minister of National Unity. So in your capacity as a young policymaker who were at the executive level, executive leadership position, what were the added values that you brought to the table during your tenure that you think could enrich the discussions on food security?
Testing. Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. Thank you for the question. I saw a few VIPs in the hall. I think that Haja, our Deputy Minister of Economy, and Tan Sri Wayoma from Bursa, and also former Minister of Economy, and of course my fellow MP from Ipoh, and fellow guests, students. First and foremost, I'm very sorry I couldn't be here for too long because I need to go back to my constituency this afternoon. But nonetheless, I would like to share my piece of thoughts about this issue. But your question, to be honest, in my previous capacity as Deputy Minister of Youth and Sports and National Unity, not much can be done on food security aspect, except of course we try to popularize or bring to the mainstream the issue of sustainability SDG into among our youth bodies like Malaysia Youth Council and others, so that more discussions, policy discussion about this topic to be understood by our younger members of the public. But nonetheless, now as an MP, I have more room and space to really affect policy in terms of this issue in Parliament especially, and also at the state level. As we all know, Kelantan, being one of the Malay belt in the country, is heavily reliant on agriculture as a source of income for the state. I think more than 20% of our GDP, state GDP, hinges on agriculture. And in my constituency is considered as rural constituency, in contrast to Howard, which is Ipoh, is very urban. Most of my voters are farmers. No, there's no fishermen because Machang is not nearby the sea. And then, of course, they are small holders and practices subsistent farming, meaning to say their income is very low. They are not attached to any corporate, and they rely on traditional method of agriculture. So, as an MP from this constituency, I foresee that the importance of federal government and state government to work in tandem to produce a long-term plan on how to improve the yield, the income, and the method of sustainable farming. I think nowadays we all know in Malaysia, despite our SSR or SSL approaching quite okay, but still there are rooms for improvement. For example, in matter of meat, we still import a lot of meat. Even our rice, we still import a lot of our rice. But as like any other countries in the world, because we rapidly move into industrial phase during Tun Mahathir's time, our share of GDP in agriculture is in decline. But this can be changed and improved by introducing technology, capital to agriculture. How and what manner? To me, one of the best ways is precision farming, where we employ technology, IoT, and any other indigenous technology that less reliant on fossil fuel to operate it, in order to improve our capacity as a agricultural nation. So, as a policymaker and as an MP from rural area where the voter base are mostly farmers, I'm very concerned and also passionate about this. Hence why I'm here today. Alhamdulillah, thank you for inviting me. And hopefully in Parliament next session in September, we'll be reviewing our the midterm review of 12 Malaysia Plan. And I think one of the major things that I would like to raise, hopefully Howard will agree to it, to debate is about agriculture, because the government, sadly, I mean, not blaming the government, because the plan was done by PN government then, during Muhyiddin's time. Our investment, our capital expenditure on developing agriculture is still low. Hence, that's why we are facing a lot of issues pertaining to food supplies, and also to increase. We're still subsidizing our farmers a lot, which is not good for long term. There must be new ways to handle or tackle these issues if you want to be more sustainable in terms of our output and also our the livelihood of our farmers. So maybe I begin with that first. Right, thank you.
Thank you very much, YB Wan Ahmad Faisal. You brought a very important point about collaboration and cooperation between federal and state governments, especially in addressing this issue, and it should be above partisan politics, I believe. This ties up, I would like to ask YB Howard Lee, you were part of the executive lineup of the state government before, as the former Exco of Youth, Sports and Human Capital Development. Now you are a backbencher as a Member of Parliament. How do you see the state and federal government could collaborate further in addressing this issue and to go beyond the partisan politics in this matter? Who should be more in charge of the issue?
Everyone should be equally in charge, not just governments, not just federal, not just state, not just local, even district level governments. I think it needs to go down to leadership in business circles. And again, that's what the national agricultural policy needs to be all-encompassing. And I think there appears to be a void in interlinkages between private agricultural players and commercial players, trading players in the market with the government at any levels. But actually, one thing that people don't realize is the role that state government plays in terms of land policy is extremely crucial in any discussion about food security, right? I've been in the state government before, and of course land policy and leveraging on land is very, very important. I think in terms of, let's say for example, if you're a farmer, sitting on a TOL, temporary operating license, which can actually be revoked on at 11:59, 31st of December every end of the year. It does not allow for risk to be taken, bold steps to be taken, and also loans to be taken for a more sustainable practice in your farm, whatever that you grow. And of course, you can say that it's, Yeah, it can be revoked every year, but normally it doesn't. But I think the key point is land policy is really important, and this stretches from the state downwards, down to pejabat tanah daerah. So the engagement between pejabat tanah daerah, PBN, pihak berkuasa negeri, bersama dengan agricultural players, conglomerates, unions, all these needs to be equally as important. I think on the back of that, I think the focus on public-private partnership is also important in the sense that banks, any bankers here, do review your lending policies, man. You know land policies are not really that great right now, and some government, I would say, frankly, PN ke, BN ke, PH punya state government semua pun not that friendly towards smallholders. Right? We both agree with that. And that's because there is a huge problem with we call social muscle memory. Oh, tanah ni POL tak boleh nak bagi lama-lama. Nanti dapat rampai pula. Duduk tak nak keluar. Dude, we're living in an age of food security crisis here. Just get out of your comfort zone and get out of your shell, and your holes and your caves, and just change land policy. But nonetheless, I think in the end, bankers, you guys need to give the farmers some room. And again, I'll tie it back to consumer culture. The more volume you give farmers, the better prices that they can charge, the higher the demand, and it goes into that feedback loop, consumer culture feedback loop. The less reliant we would be on imports, and it goes into this virtuous cycle rather than the vicious cycle that we live right now on reliance on imports. So state, federal, private, district, semua punya government pun equally responsible and have equal and should have equal, if not the closer to the grassroots you are, the more empowered you need and the more powers that you need. Did I answer your question? I think
yes,
I did, right?
Definitely. And as I am a political scientist, I'm going to ask a political question as well, because this needs political will from political parties from both sides, opposition and government. YB Wanahma Faisal, since 2018, I could say, especially 2020, Malaysia has seen a lot of political saga, right? And we had just completed 6 state elections, and there have been continuous call for a change of government. And how do we ensure that food security is an issue that, as I've mentioned before, should go beyond partisan politics? Is it possible for both blocs, the opposition and the government blocs, to sit together and discuss and address this issue beyond their political affiliations? Can we see commitments from both sides to actually address this issue? What do you think?
Yes, definitely, because this issue is an existential issue rather than a political issue. Whoever comes to power, whether at federal or the state level, we need to feed our voters, or our people. And we all know what happens if we fail to provide the staple food for the voters. Revolution, that's what happened in Paris in the 1800s, and also recently in Egypt, that sparked the Arab Spring. And same goes to Malaysia. Of course, we are not having a revolution now, but I can tell you why we won big last state election last week, because of the cost of living issue. And we all know very well the national food price index is higher than our CPI for other goods, and it is more prevalent or more serious in urban area. I think that's why we made inroad in Selangor because of that issue. I mean, roughly the one being affected the most are the Malays, because we are having lesser in terms of income, and that creates very much distressing viewpoints against the government. despite all the announcements made by the Prime Minister on Felda, for the paddy farmers, it didn't go well for PH and Barisan Nasional. So definitely this issue transcends political sentiment or partisan sentiment, because if we fail to provide solutions, long-term solutions, sustainable solutions, whoever comes to power will be affected the most. And I can tell you, currently I think all state government, whoever they are, whether Kerajaan Nasional or Barisan Nasional or even Pakatan Harapan, they will be on top of their agenda is definitely how to help alleviate cost of living issue, especially food among the populace. And as a politician, I would like to call for all of my friends. I think this is not a thorny issue. You say there will be no disagreement whatsoever if we propose that whatever plan laid out by the government of the day, especially long-term plan, like the 12 measure plan, the 5-year plan, whoever holds the power must put faith in the government, our civil service, to execute properly the projects. For example, I give you one example. Howard doesn't have a hand in this, but the Prime Minister, this is my criticism on the Prime Minister. When he comes to power, he delayed the implementation of flood mitigation projects. It's going to be a big issue at the end of the year, because once you delay the project, it will affect the farmers and others because of irrigation issues. Whatever excuses you want to say because of corruption and others, but that can be managed in other ways, actually. So I'm worried because of that delay, it will affect my constituency and many others across the country at the end of the year. I think the Sultan of Johor already raised the issue about his worry about this. And this is what I said about the need to have a political maturity to ensure that whatever good projects already being planned and executed by previous government or state government must be followed through by whoever wins the election. So I hope that will be the discipline of the politician and policymakers in years to come on this aspect. It's only by doing this kind of effort we could ensure that our plan to secure our food will not be derailed by political sentiment.
Alhamdulillah, we hear very reassuring answers from both sides, opposition and also government sides. So I think we are, hopefully, we are moving forward as a country to address this issue very seriously. Now, as we have, I think, roughly about 5 minutes, maybe closing remarks, my questions to both of you. What's your hope, especially to the young Malaysians, in addressing the issue of food security? Can the issue of food security unite young Malaysians, regardless of their ethnicity, their religious backgrounds, in finding the best solutions?
How many of you actually make conscious choices in seeking out vendors, penjaja, peniaga, warung, restaurant, who sell, produce, promote local? How many? Hands up. That's good. Now, I do not mean in any way, shape or form to promote nationalism or protectionism, no, far from that. But there is a significant impact that your choices would make on food miles and food emissions. My first request is I implore you to start putting at the back of your mind, when you make choices of which restaurant you go to, which cafe or warung you go to, look and ask. Even when you go to pasar, ikan tu tang mana? Daging tu tang mana? Sayur tu tang mana? I think these will contribute on the demand side, or contribute from the demand side onto the supply side of reducing food emissions. That's number one. Number two, I think perhaps you guys, this is the age of content creation, this is the age of the power of citizen journalism. I think it would be fantastic if, we know what celebrity chefs as a concept and the notion is, and the endorsement of celebrity chefs and, orang yang hebat-hebat buat masak-masak kat social media tu, they have the power to influence the part one that I mentioned about. And it's now time that you guys elevate yourselves as content creators, influencers, opinion leaders on social media to start getting that message out there. And it's not just about being chefs or being food producers and being food consumers. Can't we start pushing for the notion of celebrity or social media influencer farmers? Fertigation projects, I mean, I've done this before when I was in state school, where we were sponsoring, assisting, throwing out fertigation kits, dalam chili ke, cendawan ke, teaching people how to make substrates to grow their own mushrooms. Cendawan sisio boleh kita tumbuh kat rumah kita sendiri. Did you know that? Start making content about that at home and get people to start growing their own stuff now. Trust me, I am not someone to say that grow everything yourself. I'm not saying that stop eating meat, because meat, contributes a huge amount of greenhouse gases. Yes, we know that. But it's all about taking one step at a time, but taking many, many of those steps every step of the way, every day of the year. Now, my ask is, start creating content out there. Promote buying local, not for ethno-nationalistic reasons, but for global, environmental and sustainable reasons. And the last term is, now I've done several events with Professor Jeff Sachs. Who knows who Jeff Sachs is? Takkanlah pasal SDG kamu tak tahu siapa Jeff Sachs is. Now, Jeff once said to me, this was in Ipoh actually, he did a conference with me and said, sustainability is as much about combating climate change as it is about bringing happiness to people. He went on this tirade about how Bhutan is the happiest country in the world, and he said that there's actually a correlation between happiness and sustainability. We in Malaysia, the better we eat, the happier we are. Alangkah baiknya if we can make all of us happier by eating more sustainably, by purchasing and consuming more sustainably, and when we are happier, we are more sustainable. And the action that we seek, the greatest, most effective policy, doesn't only come from government, it comes from you. So take your action, be happy, eat well, produce well, consume well, and eat better and be happier and be more sustainable. Thank you.
I would like to reposition the framework of our discussion to a more fundamental perspective about this issue on sustainability and also food security. I think because we all know, I think those who are studying ecology or sciences, that most of the scientists have agreed we live currently in the age of Anthropocene. What does it mean? Where our geological time is the one being affected the most by human activities. This is very true compared to what happened before, for example, Industrial Revolution. And I think the issue of sustainability and food insecurity currently facing, that humankind facing, could also be pondered from a transcendental point of view. What do I mean by this? From a religious point of view. This is rarely been discussed by religious scholars, and also, because these are the real influencers. TikToks, yeah, those are influencers, but in rural areas, you need to talk to the ustaz in order to influence the voters, because they have more influence, not us, the politicians. So in Quran, there was one particular verse that really, if you were to read and ponder about it, is very important in this topic, where God says, "Zaharal fasad fil barri wal bahr bima kasabat aydiyan nas." There will be corruption will appear in land and sea because being done by human hands. And then God says, the consequences of that corruption, لِيُذِيقَهُمْ بَعْضَ الَّذِي عَمِلُوا لَعَلَّهُمْ يَرْجِعُونَ. God shall inflict those corruption, the effect of the corruption, onto humans, like climate change and others, flooding, lack of food, war, famine, pestilence, in order for you to return to Him. That's what Quran says. I mean, God has always warned this, and it happened throughout history, in France, in Egypt, in biblical time, so that we are reminded that actually the shortages of food, the corruption on earth, are because we have forgotten the transcendental element, our relation with God, and also the planet. Because all religion, I have read all, Buddhism, Christianity, whatever religion in this planet will always prioritize environment. We are part of the environment. But secular point of view, this is blamed to the Descartes and Aristotelian point of view, where you separate man from nature. Man controls nature. Because of this point of view, ontological point of view, we have this current mess in our planet. The distraction that Greta and also Josh Monbiot showcased just now were happening so rapidly for the past 200 years after man discovered steam engine. Prior to that, our agriculture practices, our fishery and others were done in very sustainable manner. No overfishing, no overconsumption, and hence also for the youth that appeared before me today, I would like to advocate for you guys to champion this issue not just as a boutique issue, but as a national movement. And you must talk this in a vernacular language, in Bahasa, in Tamil, in Mandarin, because you want to create a movement, you cannot speak in this kind of language, of course. English, of course, is good for international forum, but to go to the rakyat, you must be able to speak their lingo. And it's not easy. Pakcik-pakcik kampung ni mana dia faham sustainable apa betul. Tapi dia faham cara hidup yang tidak merosakkan. So, Quran also says, God commanded everyone, Kulu washrabu wala tusrifu. Eat and drink, but do not waste. So beautiful. And this is where our modern way of living is linear in nature. What we should advocate from policy point of view is circular economy. This is where, if I would, well, maybe I will talk in Parliament later, the need to institutionalize permaculture at the local grassroots level. Permaculture is very green, Islamic, Maqasidic, Sharia compliant agriculture. You use whatever resources provided by your environment to rear your chicken and farming, without overburdening the soil with pesticide and others. Yeah, Roundup from Monsanto, Cargill and others. So these are the practices that we must champion. And also, Malaysia relies heavily on monoculture. What is monoculture? Palm oil. Because that's the commodity that gives profit or earning for our country. But for the environment, it's bad in the long run. I'm not saying I'm against palm oil. What I'm saying, we need to diversify our crops. Ini problem kita kat Malaysia. Because kita dah, it is, and you know, palm oil is a colonial legacy. It's not our indigenous crop. It's being brought by the British. It's from Africa. Malaysia or Malay world were never exposed to this crop before. We have other types of crops to support our people in terms of income and others. So you guys can reimagine the future together with us as policy makers. Kalau kami lupa, ketuklah kami dalam parlimen tu, tak ada masalah. But thank you for the opportunities given. I rarely can speak about this, you know, except with intelligent group of people like you guys. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. Thank you, Howard, for being with me today. And thank you for having us.
Let's please join me in applauding these two distinguished gentlemen. Thank you very much. I hope you can get the takeaways from our speakers today. to be discussed further, and as YB Wan Ahmad Faisal said himself, if he forgot, we can nod their heads. Alright, thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much to our moderator Dr. Rabia Aminuddin, Senior Lecturer Political Science Department, IIUM, and also, once again, let's give a big round of applause for these two young MPs, Yang Berhormat Wan Ahmad Faisal MP Machang, and also Yang Berhormat Awani MP Ipoh Timur. Alright, so for the next session, I would like to invite our next moderator, Wan Muhammad Hidayat, with the topic of empowering youth as catalysts for sustainable future in Malaysia, and they will touch on the point of quality education, gender equality, decent work and economic growth, industry, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, peace, justice and strong institutions, partnerships for the goals. And Hidayat also will introduce the guests on stage.
Assalamualaikum dan hai dan selamat sejahtera to everybody here. My name is Hidayat and I'll be moderating our last session of this morning. So today we'll be talking about, the name of the topic is Empowering Youth as Catalysts for Climate Action, a high-level dialogue for a sustainable future in Malaysia. Without further ado, I would like to invite one of our three panels today, starting with Tan Sri Dr. Jamilah Mahmud. And joining us today is also Datin Saino Salwa. And lastly, we have Encik Asfazam Kasbani. Alright, first of all, I would like to say thank you to our panels here for being here. I know this morning is quite hard to find parking, right, because the road is blocked. So, allow me to introduce each of our panel today. So, first and foremost, we have Tan Sri Dr. Jamilah Mahmud here. She is a distinguished leader with a remarkable 25-year career as an obstetrician and gynecologist. And beyond that, she used to be a chairman of the Secretary of the UN World Humanitarian Summit and president and founder of Mercy Malaysia. And currently, she serves as the executive director at Sunway Center for Planetary Health. And secondly, we have Datin Saino Salwa Sani. She's also a remarkable leader and an expert in human capital and has worked across many industries, such as Kazanak National, SME Bank, and Malaysia Airlines. Currently, she is the Chief Human Resource Officer at Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad. And lastly, on the left here, we have Encik Asfazam Kasbani. He started off as an engineer early on in his career, and he has collected vast experience in energy and climate as an assistant resident representative head of program at the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, in the region of Malaysia, Singapore, and Brunei. And currently, he is the newly appointed Director of National SDG Center at the Ministry of Economy. All right. So let's set some objective here. By the end of this high-level dialogue, we hope to understand two things. First, what is the role of youth in the decision-making process of climate action? And secondly, how can the government and the corporate sectors collaborate with each other and help in empowering youth as catalysts for climate action? So for us to dive deeper into these topics, let us first understand where we are as a nation. I would like to address this first question to Dr. Jamila. So the question is, what is the level of awareness of climate change among youth in Malaysia? Can you give me a bit of thought on that?
Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I think it depends who you ask. What is the level of awareness? There have been several studies, Ipsos, Star newspaper, and others, and most recently by Monash University. And I would say the level of awareness is pretty good in the sense that they are aware what climate change is, but what is lacking though is what can they do about it. So I think that is one of the issues. I think with Sustainable Development Goals, there's probably less awareness. Maybe in the city areas, it's something that people know, but very much something we need to think about. How do rural societies and rural youth understand sustainability and climate change as well? So it's really not a level playing field. I think I want to start from there. We are the privileged ones. In Kuala Lumpur, we have these opportunities to gather and talk about these things. But how do we now bring these dialogues and these discussions to the ground, to people who don't live in situations as we do, and using very simple language that they can understand and relate to?
Thank you, Dr. Jamila, for the thought. Encik Asfar, during your time at UNDP, you may have worked closely in the ASEAN region, right? Singapore, Brunei, and Malaysia. And how are we doing compared to our ASEAN neighbors?
Thanks, Hidayat, for that question. So I would just like to also continue what Tan Sri Jamila has mentioned. When you talk about climate change, especially in the urban setting, it is seen like an elitist agenda, put it that way. The city kind of city girl or city boy kind of a coffee talk kind of a agenda, But what needs to be done is actually going beyond in terms of geographical setting, beyond cities, beyond urbanization context. Maybe have a discussion with kampung people, with colleagues in Sabah and Sarawak and all those. In my experience, liaising with various communities in Sarawak, they have tons of experience, they have tons of knowledge. Most of them are indigenous solutions. I can give examples. For instance, like, I would say that for the past 10 years, we've been talking about solar hybrid project, and some of it is, what we mean by hybrid is actually micro hydro, and then we combine it with solar PV, right? But do you know that Tony Bong in Sabah, do you have any Sabahan Tony Bong? Yeah, good job, man. So they have been doing that. They have been doing it for many, many years. From small scale, 10 kilowatt kind of turbine, depending on the types of water that they have, types of river that they have. It's not actually dam-based hydro system. It's micro hydro run-off river. This has been done for many, many years, and they have been powering the communities, huts, some of it rumah panjang, and of course they did face challenge and all that. So coming back to your questions, is the awareness is there, the context is different. So we need to go beyond that, beyond urban, beyond city setting, and really localize the issue on this subject matter. I stop for now. I think a lot I can tap on it. Thanks.
Yeah, we're gonna come back to that later. But now to address you, Dr. Datin Salwa, even with a high level of awareness, it doesn't really mean it is an indicator of participation. So, weigh in on this, can we say that level of awareness and level of Malaysia goes hand in hand?
I would like to echo what awareness, even at the corporate sector, is still varied. There are organizations or corporate sector who strongly believe when we talk about sustainability, and there are still those who are still talking purely from the basis of PBT, right? It's kind of something that we really need to establish the technology, taking into consideration. I do believe not only in Malaysia, still around the world, we are talking about awareness and understanding. Might be there on the awareness, but clear understanding, I think, something that we really need to push forward more so-called formula in calculating it, in measuring it. It's kind of something that we need to establish more. As it's varied at the people level, at the community level, even at the corporate level, I do believe the levels of awareness and understanding still vary, regardless whether you are in the city or you are in non-city area.
Right, thank you for that thought. I want to explore more about what you said about what Dr. Jamila also said about communicating science to the public so they can understand the complex situation of climate change, right? Because, for example, if we talk about greenhouse gas, most of us here would understand what it means, but for the layman people, we address this gap. Dr. Jamila?
So this is a very important question, because if you look at the science that is and the evidence UN office in Baghdad was formed in 1990. So, we when there is a crisis because of climate change. Many of the conflicts and wars that happen is actually because of water. So when you're pastoralist farmers and you have to move your cattle and water, just spare thought for those who have passed today, and many other crises as well. Now, coming back to communications, why it's important to look at communications, but not just communications for communication's sake. You need to look at communications for behavioral change. Because at the end of the day, the evidence is super clear. We know the science, we know the economics, we know the climate science, the meteorological science. But why is it so we live in what is called the age that everything that happens is actually because of us. We as humans have actually destroyed the planet. And therefore, you know, if we are going to find solutions are with us. And we have the solutions. We have the knowledge, we have the skills, we have the innovations. We now need to have the commitment and, most important, the political will to move this along. So communicating science and climate change now is something that, you know, many people have realized was a real missing gap. If you look at the UNFCCC reports over the years, you'll see data poured out, right? Even myself as a scientist, I get lost by page 3 because it's just numbers and figures and words, right? But the recent report, if you notice, take a look if you haven't, it talks about what will it be like when you're in 2080, 2060, to imagine what is life going to be for your grandchild or for your daughter to be born. So, you know, how do you communicate such that people can actually internalize that it's everyone's business and it's in everyone's interest to take climate change seriously. So I think this is where communications is important. And if you're going to talk to people in the kampong, not to belittle their knowledge, but because they perceive things maybe differently and to communicate things differently, how do we now use communications to change behaviors? So at a personal level, you know, I run a planetary health center, and planetary health really is a multi-systems approach so that we achieve the SDGs, so we get to a safer planet. And right now, what we're doing is we're exploring all sorts of things. For example, I just had a good meeting with Upin Ipin, Tuan Haji Burhan. How do we bring climate change and sustainability into Upin Ipin cartoons? How do we now, we are using PlayStation, so we're working with Sony Interactive Studios to make sure that you can have something called a climate station game. How do you make everyone superheroes to save the planet and to understand what climate change means? So these are the different kinds of communication, but also to understand the communications landscape differs according to context. Not everyone absorbs communication the same way as you and I. So if you go to, I give you one example. When I was with the Orang Asli, and talking to them about, what is it like? How has your community changed? And they will tell you, the rivers now are more dry. I can't get enough fish, right? My forests now have been taken away. I don't have as much biodiversity. So they understand climate change from their perspectives of their living environment. And I think this is what we need to always bear in mind as we craft communications, because at the end of the day, we've got to have behavioral change as well. And it's not just for people in the communities, but for our politicians as well.
Right. So communication needs to be tailor-made for each group of society, right? And you mentioned about SDGs, right? And actually, Asfa here is an expert of SDG. Would you mind sharing with us what are the initiatives of the SDG Center currently? Although it's new, what are your goals for that? And how can we translate those goals into a more meaningful format for these different communities that we have in Malaysia?
Sure. But before that, finish very difficult. But I still remember how me, my colleagues, my university friends, we were so engaged in those games, and I can imagine if we can embed, include the idea about environmental conservation, SDG, inside those apps, games, that would be very, very impactful. All right. You're probably wondering why there is a Ministry of Economy logo up there. I mean, if there's a camera, can you just focus on that, Ministry of Economy? So we are here to support the agenda. And Cik Roman, thanks so much for bringing us up here. And we got a strong signal, a strong leadership from our Yang Berhormat Deputy Minister, who still stay in this discussion, listening to all of your points and also grounds. Thanks so much for all. Alright, a little bit about SDG Center. SDG Center has been mandated by the previous Prime Minister to be established sometime in October 2022. We just managed some of the internal bureaucracy. I'm just be on board from 1st of August this year. And in fact, I have our deputy as well, Cik Azmir, somewhere here, Cik Azmir. Colleagues, if you need more information about SDG, Cik Azmir is there as well. So we are entrusted to basically coordinate the work on SDG in Malaysia under the auspices of Ministry of Economy. You talk about SDG alone, although now we are talking about sustainability, climate change, SDG 13, SDG 6, water and accounting, but SDG matters, development matters. It covers across the board. I would love to see discussion about poverty reduction program, SDG 1, SDG 5, gender. What has been, how's the progress now? Those kind of things. So this is where the role of SDG Center is. We are trying to find an interlink with all these developments efforts, not just on the sustainability part of it. And I'm also linking the work in Ministry Economy together with our team in Ministry Economy. Watch this space. The midterm review is supposed to be launched hopefully in September. So you will see some efforts on how the government is moving towards alignment to SDG matters, how each demographics, the youth can play a role, how the senior citizens, how people with disability can also play a role and being affected and being benefited from the work that we are doing. So that's pretty much what we are doing for now, Cik.
Thank you, Jasper. I would like to steer our conversation a bit about going back to behavioral change. And I know that Datin Sanu Salwa, you have worked extensively in human capital management, and you studied sociology also, right? about how corporate, they also have like a very narrow-minded view of sustainability, right?
I think from the perspective of human capital itself, we are also undergoing an evolution of understanding and encapsulating sustainability as part of people development, talent management as well. It used to be purely hiring and firing. We are very good on both. And then we move towards talent management, right? You hear about talent management framework, leadership assessment. It's purely based on what business need. But I do believe now, human capital, we are in transition. I don't think we are there yet in terms of incorporating the elements of sustainability on the people. But we are moving towards that. The question is actually, as much as sustainability are still new area for everyone, incorporating it in human capital development also require a little bit more understanding and study on how are we going to do that. Because when we talk about human, as famously known in bank, I think Tan Sri Wahid also know, people talk, money don't. So regardless of whatever framework or philosophy that we are putting in place, there are an element of balancing with the requirements of the organization as well. So from human capital point of view, we are still struggling. I admit, we are still struggling on how we assess a holistic development of talent, whether they are youth or they are adults, taking into consideration the apprehension and also the demonstrations of the sustainability. This could be area that we may want to explore it planetary as well, how we measure. Because our current definitions of talent, for example, in an organization or under human capital, has been purely based on self-development, how you treat people, basically three principles: managing self, managing business, and managing others. We need to incorporate the elements of managing environment, managing sustainability. Those are areas that we could explore, and potentially some area that we could work with all of you, because you may have more knowledge than us. We are the periods of people yang pakai plastic bag banyak kan, but you guys are the ones actually creating that awareness. But then at the end of the day, when we talk about people, when we talk about talent management, it goes back to the principles of attitude, altitude, and aptitude, right? To what extent you are able to stretch your capability, your grit, hunger for knowledge, wanting to do more, and also being coupled as well with to what extent you are willing to be stretched as well, right? We cannot be expecting others to change, but we want to remain seated in our own seat. It doesn't work if everyone's behaving like that. And last but not least, also on our attitude. Change management. I hear someone mention about change management. Change management can go two ways. Either you do it in hostile manner, or you do it in collaborative manner. One of the reasons why we partner, for example, Club Belia Prihatin, I love Luqman's behavior and attitude. It's very humble. He understands the need to work closely with everyone. I think those part of something that we need to also understand, the people's sentiment. Human, they are still human, right? At the end of the day, you see generation who tell you, saya makan garam lagi banyak dari awak. And I got blood pressure more than you. But those are something that we need to be very mindful. People are still people, human still human. And it goes back to Tan Sri's mention about communicating. How you communicate with different levels of individual. I know you have agenda, but how you put forward is also important.
Thank you. Hold on to that thought, because I want to go back to talent and jobs in green jobs in Malaysia. But before that, I would like to ask each of you, how did you tackle your most pertinent issue of your time? Because I mean, at this, you all have been youth at some point in your life, right? And this is a youth forum. So climate change arguably is the most pertinent issue of our time today, but it might not be for you guys, right? You might be tackling issues such as war, global hunger, or maybe mass migration. So how would you say that you tackling those issues during back in your time can be transferable in tackling issues such as climate change today? Dr. Jamila?
To be honest, I still think I'm a youth at heart. And that's the problem. That's a real problem, right? And I think, honestly, it's an intergenerational partnership that we need to have, right? It's not, young people on their own can't do everything, and older people can't do everything on their own. We need to work together. I think let's establish that, number one. I think the most important thing is, where does your passion and conviction lie, right? When I was younger, many years ago, for me, okay, my journey is a very different journey. It started very, very young. So as a person who went to a missionary school, from day one, you're always being taught about charity and helping others. As a Girl Guide, as a Leo Club member, and all the other activities, but also at home, where my family was very much involved in making sure that we weren't the only ones comfortable. And I always tell people that my humanitarian debut was on May 13, 1969, when my parents felt very strongly that the whole conflict that we were going through at the time hurt us so deeply. And I come from a mixed marriage, right? I have Malay and Chinese blood. So as a 9-year-old, that's how old I am, I had to be the person who delivers food to the neighborhood, because I was small enough to walk in the monsoon drains, and my parents had a map for me to go. So if from young, all of us here, we need to make sure that when we have children, we inculcate those values in them as well, right? That to want for others what we want for ourselves. I think that's established that, number one. How did I move, right? I would consider myself a builder. I like building things, and I like nurturing young people. This is my trademark, that any organization I work in, my staff are generally much, much younger than average age in any other organization. Because, I get energy from young people. So I think that, and young people, I hope, get wisdom from me. So we trade, right? So that nice trade-off. But I think the most important thing is that whatever you want to do, be super clear what the end game is. Map out who are your friends who will help you to get there, because you know you can't do it alone. Who are the people who might be deterring you from achieving your goals, so that you also need to keep your enemies close. And then always, always be willing to fail and learn, because nothing is going to be perfect. In my last international job, I had something called a failure festival. And I also had a bell. I worked in Switzerland, my last international job. So we had a huge cowbell in the office. And anytime any of my staff achieved anything, the bell would ring. And all of us would gather in one corner of the office, and I had 150 staff reporting to me. And then, we would say, what is the bell ringing for, right? So we celebrate something. Sometimes it can be very silly. It can be someone just passed a barista license or something like that, right? Or I secured a $200 million grant or something like this. And then, when we also have the failure festival, where we celebrate and learn from failure. So the best learning will be given an award. So what this does is to really open up the space for the staff to take calculated risks and to innovate. And I think this is where young people are so good at that, right? I'll give you one concrete example. 2015, my staff came to me and said, we want to sign with TikTok. It was this 2015, you didn't know what TikTok was, right? And I said, what on earth is TikTok? So they were showing me, and I said, but why is this even important? And my young officer said, the social media officer said, this is going to be the future. This is how we go. And of course, I had to jump through 6 hurdles with the legal department saying, but this is from China. And I said, so, oh no, but they'll monitor us. So you think the US doesn't monitor you or anybody else? So I said, okay, since I signed on the dotted lines as the Undersecretary General, I signed the partnership with TikTok. The organization IFRC that I used to be at now has, I think, 3 million TikTok followers, is the leading humanitarian organization and can get their message across very, very quickly. Now, had I not taken that risk and had my staff not taken the risk to come and talk to me about this, it would have been a different story. So, passion, conviction, very clear vision, and find your allies and how you get there.
That was very inspiring. Yeah, you did a good job. We would actually love to hear each of you, your experience, but we are actually running out of time. But I think since we have a lot of graduates in the audience, I think it's better for me to raise the question of job opportunities in Malaysia, especially when it comes to green jobs. There's stories about people going abroad and then studying sustainability programs, coming back, they cannot find green jobs. Do you care to comment on this issue that it's
Okay, when we talk about job opportunity, first of all, Bank Pembangunan, we measure of our financing using sustainability lens. We have our own framework. So if you do have background in sustainability, please submit your resume to me. We also have, I have my recruitment drive here. So if we also have our so-called NGO kind of arm, we call it ALAM. The purpose actually for creating education and awareness with regards to sustainability, climate change as well, and biodiversity. So if you are interested and do have the qualification, please come and see me as well. Because we are looking for this kind of talent. Honestly, it's not easy to find this talent in the market now. But if you do have, there are lots of organizations. We have investment, Iskandar investment as well. Today, we are looking for those people with capability. The question is actually, do you know where to go? Have you done enough research on company that promote sustainability, or you are still opting for the normal traditional, sexy organization as part of your resume building? So those are questions that I want to ask all of you, because the biggest problem is actually, you still want to go to big company with big pay, with big tickets, then you may need to compromise your principles on certain things. So you also need to do your research. And I do believe now a lot of organizations are providing opportunity for sustainability. The right organization. Even recently for Bank Pembangunan, we offer half of our scholarship for graduate studies. Actually, the criteria must be, the studies must be relevant to sustainability. So some organizations are moving towards that, but you need to know where to go, or else you get frustrated. Because as I said, there are still varied levels of understanding and demonstrations of understanding of sustainability in Malaysia itself and across companies in Malaysia. Does it take two to tango? While we are expecting the companies also to do that, we need also to play our role in propagating and communicating. I like the fact when Tan Sri mentioned about while you have a passion, you also need to find right party to tango, right? Yeah, if you tango with the wrong party, then both of you get missteps on this. Yeah, those are very important. With accessibility of information, I think you would know which company focus more, and you could align your interest and your passion as well. And when we talk about youth, at the end of the day, my late father always say this, okay? If you are not helping to cook in the kitchen, you have no right to criticize the food. So, while we are having this conversation, then the question comes back, are we making an effort towards it? If we are not, then it goes all the way across the country itself, right? Parties involved, you have the right to put forward, or else then you lose your right as well.
Thank you very much, Datin Sainosawa. Jasper, would you like to weigh in on that?
Yeah, I mean, I can share my views on that as well. You know, sustainability field is here to stay. It won't go away. Don't worry about it. what I notice is that when people wanting to go to university, because they know that sustainability is the in thing, they are looking for Bachelors of Science in Sustainability, those kind of thing. It's very difficult. My suggestion is just continue with what you are good at. Let's say you are in Bachelors of Mechanical Engineering or Economics or Electrical, whatever, or Agriculture Science and all that. But when you go into your job market, focus on sustainability matters. Sustainability is also a multidisciplinary field. It's not just science-based. It's not just experimentation, lab-based kind of work. It does involve economics. It does involve analysis. It does involve human capital. It does involve communication as well. So you can choose which sectors that you are good at and expand those subject matter. Okay, you said that you are interested in oil and gas sector. Okay, fine, but you worried that oil and gas doesn't have a good image in terms of sustainability. Hey, as I know, our national oil and gas company has tons of opportunity in terms of working in non-engineering, non-science-based kind of sectors. They need analysis, they need economics, and those kind of things. In government as well, let's say we want to do subsidy rationalization for electricity tariff, and those actually the economics kind of field that you need to have. It doesn't really coming from the science or mechanical engineering kind of base, so those are the areas that you will foresee that there is opportunities and that you can work with in the future. So yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Aswar. Dr. Jimla would like to add something on that?
You touched on something so important that I just need to build on it. You mentioned education, and I think we need an education revolution. Because the way young people need to be educated now has got to be very different. You can take knowledge from digital sources and so forth. What you need is guidance on how to apply the knowledge, right? So I used to get very annoyed with my son when we were living in New York. He always had his headphones in his ear while helping me in the kitchen. And I used to say, you can't constantly listen to music. And he looked at me and says, I'm not listening to music. I'm listening to a YouTube lecture on something, right? So I mean, even I had to be educated, right? That young people absorb information and knowledge a different way. But speaking as a medical doctor, I graduated in 1986. You weren't born yet. But they never taught us about climate and health. And climate change is one of the biggest drivers of biggest problems in health. This is 2023. It's still not in the curriculum. So a bunch of us are really pushing the medical fraternity to change. The Canadian Medical Education Board is now trying to change the entire medical education because climate change is there to stay. One of my friends who's driving this, she's now fleeing her place in Yellowknife, which is now being engulfed with forest fires, right? So from a time when, as an emergency doctor, she had to deal with people coming in because they had ice falling on their head and getting a cut, she now has to deal with people coming in because they're being smoked out of their homes. That's what climate change has done. So what we're trying to do, at the Sunway Center where I work, I mean, it's a very new center, but we've been able to revolutionize education at the university. So from next year, if you're coming to Sunway, it will be mandatory for you to pass a 7-week module on sustainability and planetary health before you can graduate. But what it is applied across the board. Whether you're studying engineering or culinary science, you will be given the basic foundation and understanding what sustainability and planetary health is, and then you have to do a program with the community. How do you apply your engineering skills to sustainability? That's what you meant. It's not about just studying sustainability, but applying your knowledge, because we need economists, we need finance people, we need anthropologists, we need scientists, we need communicators, we need musicians, we need culinary arts people to talk about sustainability and to do sustainability. So you know, there are many, many ways we can move the sustainability agenda, but I completely agree with Astro. It's here to stay. We have no choice. It is our existential crisis now. And you know, it's unfortunate that my generation has created this problem for your generation, but you know, we all have to work very hard now.
Thank you, Dr. Jamila. Education is needed now and not later, but now. There are many more questions, but unfortunately, we are all hungry now, right? We are now open. We open the floor to Q&A. If anybody would like to ask questions, you may raise your hand, and then our team will come and pass you the mic. Sure, go ahead.
I'm just giving some ideas for the context of human capital, right? With regards to sustainability. Some profession getting this stature because it is being so-called professionalized. Why can't we do the same for sustainability? That's how we bring sustainability to the next level. Make it a professional track. Make it sexy. Then it gets noticed. It gets the right attention. That's what happened to, Dr. Tan Sri Jamila, the doctor, the like of accountant, for example, right? Because they are being recognized by some recognition body. I think we should do something for sustainability because it's in thing. Maybe from Ministry of Economy would like to consider this. Give it the stature, then it's being given the right regards and also attention in the country.
Thank you, Dr. Yeah, a question from the floor.
Assalamualaikum and a very good afternoon, everyone. My name is Muhammad Amirul. I'm from Ucapan, Malaysia. Coming here all the way from Seremban this morning. So basically, my question is, I want to talk about mindset. Actually, you know, like there's a lot of universities in Malaysia. Some universities, like most of us, like we are from a city campus. We are from UiTM Shah Alam, UiTM Puncak Alam, all city campus, and a lot of campus they are in rural and urban area. I studied in UiTM Justin for 1 year, and I see how the mindset there, and they don't understand about sustainability and how we as like young people or we as like NGOs, as me, I'm from YouthCare, convey this message in like kampung people way. You know, like we talk in like how like even though like I'm from Seremban and like most of my families, they don't know how to like what is Youth Sustainability Forum. I told them, oh, I'm going for a conference. And what conference? Sustainability? Oh, I don't know that. What's that, right? So like they are not open to. I mean, like, they don't understand what is this and like what's our plan to attack to this all people in the rural and urban area. And I guess I'm open to work with YouthCare Malaysia. Thank you so much.
Any of you like to weigh in on that? Or do you have any specific person you want to ask?
I think that's Jamila.
That's Jamila, the favorite person.
So I put my mind.
So this is why I'm saying you need an education revolution. It has to be part and parcel of curriculum. It has to be embedded in education, not just at university level, but from a very young age. And this is what Alam is trying to do, really tackle it from a younger age. I don't know if you know, but there is sustainability schools. What is it? It's called this initiative where schools are actually doing sustainability programs and they actually give awards. And it's what? Sorry? Sekolah Lestari, yeah. So it's actually going quite well. You know, you see children not in Kuala Lumpur, and the ones who are winning are not in Kuala Lumpur, actually talking about waste management, about growing vegetables, about carbon footprint and all that. So I think, but it cannot be one-off. It cannot be an initiative. It has to be a curriculum decision. We have a young education minister now. This is our opportunity to really get her to really look at, help us see that we need a real radical shift in how we educate people. I think that has to happen. So I'm sorry that you're not getting it in Seremban, where Seremban is so close to us. But I think also through youth networks, this is where you play a very important role.
One more question from the floor before we go for lunch.
Hello.
Two more. Okay, yeah, sure.
Rahim from My Clean Beach and also UNESCO JYC. And actually, it is not that education that we are lacking, because from my observation from the people I've met, actually is the encouragement and encouragement and passion that we are lacking. Because let's say in school we were taught of those 3 R's, right? Reuse, recycle, and reduce, right? But when I ask my circle of friends, or maybe outside of my circle of friends, do you know about the well-being or something that is going on wrong with the world? That is affecting our health and also the mother nature, right? The mother nature's our health. But when I ask them, they say, yes, of course, we are aware. And I ask them, do you want to do something about it? Oh yeah, I had plans. But do you actually want to do it? Because they lack encouragement. Because they don't know where to start. Even if we start to educate them, we did, but they lack encouragement. So I just want to ask any of you which had exposures in convincing, such as the world's champion Greta. She alone herself at 16, she would just convince, right? But I don't know how we could convince and encourage our people, because she alone at 16 can encourage the whole world globally, and that is something impressive. But I don't see it here. So I would like to see, I want to know your point of views, how we would do it. Thank you.
If you ask HR practitioner, there are two ways of inculcating that, right? So I use a more orang kata ni, we call it psychology and rotanlogy. So sometimes you just need to whip, but the whipping must be done concurrently across, even from the top to the bottom. So we need to balance the usage of the psychology and the rotanlogy, because if you, all the time psychology, nanti orang jadi lemak kan, manja, lembek, tak boleh gerak. But there are also moments that you really need to put that enforcement. You need that whip so that people know that no, this is non-negotiable. It's not because it's wrong, it's just non-negotiable. So this is something that when we talk about the values of organization of the country, our norm, there are things that we just need to tell people this is non-negotiable. So once we start a certain quarter of the country doing that, then people get the message across. If there are flip-floppings with regards to the executions of the certain policy, then people are not getting the message. They say, okay, I go here, I get exemption. I go here, I don't get anything, right? Same goes to the organization. In company as well, there are certain things I say non-negotiable. You break it, out of the door. So those are something that we need to also plan and identify. What would be the strategies? Are we using the soft approach or are we using the hard approach? But both are important.
Can I just come in? I mean, like to bring up what Tan Sri Jamila mentioned just now about awareness, behavioral change, or behavioral insights. That should be a number 1 thing that needs to be done. But I would like to also bring up that behavioral change alone will not resolve any issues, will not be a 100% solution to that. So that's why at the policy level, there is actually a pull and push factor. When you talk about pushing things, so there will be some regulation that needs to be done. There will be some
incentive that needs to be forwarded and all that. Just to give you some context, which already has been happening for the past 10 years, if you look into your TNB bills, you will see 1.6% contribution to the renewable energy tabung fund, And since then, you can see a lot of work on renewable energy which has really ongoing now. That is actually at the government's level. Solar PV has been widely spread, widely implemented, which we learned from other countries at that time. That is one of the examples where the government can come in and assist the nation in terms of moving the agenda forward. So just to conclude, it's basically behavioral insight as well as some of the regulation and incentivization that needs to be done. Over.
I think there's one more question. Oh, there are a few. You gotta fight for it. Okay, that guy's already. Okay.
I'm Abastan Mustafa from UMP. So, actually, I am a PhD researcher. I'm doing polymer engineering. So, actually, I have two questions. One is like when previously I have developed nano energy, so nano fuel from palm oil waste. So we have developed. Government gave us the FRGS project grant. So fundamental research grant. We did research and we developed a fuel from palm oil waste. And so now when the project is successful, I have produced palm oil waste. So so my question is that the product is successful, but how can we move forward with this product? So the R&D is following the sustainable goal, and it's from waste material. So this is one of my question, and another one is that currently I am developing self-healing polymer. So this can potentially replace plastic. So how can still there is lack of budget while we are doing research? So how can we raise budget fund for the R&D as well as while there are lots of, I'm feeling that for publicity there are lots of fund, but when we are doing R&D the fund is quite minimal. So what we can do actually to address this? Thank you.
I think the first thing that you need to do is do a little bit of mapping of available assistance and R&D assistance that you can explore with. What I can lead you to is actually you can look into MOSTI, Malaysia or Ministry of Science, Technology, Innovation website. I think there are quite a number of information that you can get as a start. And I know for the fact that some of the agencies established by the government, like Meranti used to be Magic last time, and quite a number of capital ventures are already into this kind of work. So do explore those spaces, and hopefully we'll find some solution on that.
And there's also Khazanah's Dana Impact. Khazanah has done an impact and he's got a lot of money. If you have a good proof of concept that you can take to scale up, then you can also explore that.
Oh, I forgot. Ministry of Economy, Innovator, where YB Rafizi is one of the judges. So please watch Astro AWANI Innovator. You can see that how things are being done, a bottom-up indigenous solution to some of this SDG problem.
All right, we'll look at one last question.
Hello, my name is Gadishwar Punjale and I'm 14 years old from TMP Little Scientist Club. So I am thank you. So I'm actually someone from innovation background. So I'd like to know your thoughts on AI technology like ChatGPT on creating new innovations to combat climate change. Yeah.
This is a whole lecture. I'm actually running something called Humans and Machines Threat or Solutions with Cambridge University, but this is the space to watch, right? I think ChatGPT and other AI tools are going to help us accelerate the innovations that we want. They will give us a lot of new ideas. It's an area that is quite feared by many because there's a lot of things that are still feared and unknown, right? In the AI sort of world, but this is your world, your reality. So I'm not an expert in AI, but what we have been doing, at least at Sunway, we are doing a lot. We have something called 42KL. I do encourage you to apply. You don't need a degree to get in there, but that's where we teach you coding and AI and all that. We're also doing it for refugees now. So this is the space. And I think that a lot of new solutions and ideas will come from that. So it is a space opening up right now, so do explore it, but check out 42KL. Yeah. You know, I would like a woman's voice to be heard. Yeah, there's a few of them like running around.
Please. Can someone pass the mic to the young lady right there?
Two young ladies.
Yeah.
Good morning, Tan Sri Jamila and Tating Sanusrawa and Mr. Asprajam and the MC. So I'm In Hui, a pharmacy student from the Segi University. So I will be the future healthcare worker. So I have a question. So how can the healthcare services contribute to the sustainability? Thank you.
That's Dr. Jamila's expertise.
This is another 1 hour lecture. Now, if the health industry was a country, the global health industry, you put it all together and you call it a country, it will be the 5th largest emitter in the world. This is how polluting the health industry is. So we run a program called Healthcare Without Harm, where we are working now with Ministry of Health to say, how do you now rapidly decarbonize the healthcare system? So you as a pharmaceutical student, this is very much up your street. For example, the packaging of drugs, right? When I was a young child, this is many, many, many years ago, my medicine came in paper envelopes. Do you remember, Tanshima? You were too young as well. But you know, but now it's all plastic. And plastic comes from what? Fossil fuels, right? For example, single-use disposables. We saw this during the pandemic, right? All the masks being thrown away. How many of you, be honest, how many of you, when you dispose your mask, you actually rip the strings off? See, well, not many. Do you know why I asked this? Do you want to know? Yeah. Because if you don't, the loops actually get caught in turtles and animals and all sorts of things, right? So it really causes a lot of damage to our wildlife. So simple things like that. So I think you are in the pharmaceutical industry. When you graduate, and even now, before graduating, push your lecturers, ask them, how are we decarbonizing the pharmaceutical industry? How do we contribute to decarbonizing healthcare?
Okay, I think that's all the time that we have today for this session. And that concludes our session this morning. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank our amazing panels and for their valuable insights. And I hope that our audience can take away from this meaningful conversation and start to be a part of climate action. I'll pass the floor to Hafizu.
Right, thank you very much to our moderator, Wan Muhammad Hidayah. Once again, let's give a big round of applause to our all panelists, Sri Greta Thunberg, Executive Director, Sangul Center for Public Health, Datin Sainur Salwasani, Chief of Human Resource Officer, Bank Pembangunan Malaysia Berhad, dan Asfazam Kasbani, Director National SDG Center, Ministry of Economy. Thank you very much. And yeah, just now we have the topic of empowering youth as catalyst for sustainable future in Malaysia. And next, we will take a break for maybe 1 hour. You may proceed to dining area outside of this theatre hall. And also, if you want to perform solat, you may proceed to Masjid Jami behind this building, around 2 minutes walking distance. Thank you and see you again at 2:15 p.m.